Continue. Coming up to the stage now is a local storyteller whose stories are usually a bit more performance-based. So this is a bit of a change for him. And we're very lucky to have him here tonight. It's something completely different than the last couple of speeches. It's very entertaining, and it is a very, shall we say, uniquely Southern, old school Southern family story. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Lee Smith.
Hello. I didn't mean to tread on Brad's introduction, but I just realized that I didn't bring my glasses. And I was hoping he printed this in the size of the font that I sent him, which was for old blind people. It's a little small, so that may force me to slow down. Hey, well, yes. Just the mic. Oh, sorry. I'm busy messing with my iPhone because I want to record this. Can you hear me? Better? Okay. Yes, actually, I probably. You are my favorite person this week. Oh, and they're nice and purple and thin. I love it. The Navy used to have a picture of a man in a naval uniform standing on the edge of a dock looking up at an aircraft carrier. The slogan read, "Join the Navy and see the world." My Uncle Harlan took that slogan to heart and joined the Navy in 1955 and made the military his career. He traveled around the world. My mother and her sisters would receive trinkets and souvenirs from his various ports of call. Small treasures for girls growing up on a farm in rural Elmore County, Alabama. However, if you ever asked Uncle Harlan about his adventures, he would say, "I don't have any stories, my boy. Nothing ever happened to me." I did not find out until after his death that he served as a signalman first class on the USS Enterprise, the first Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. She is to be decommissioned this year after 52 years of service. She is still the longest naval vessel ever built. Uncle Harlan was part of the inaugural crew of the Enterprise. He put her through her paces during her sea trials and was on board when she was christened and commissioned. And as part of that inaugural crew, he owns a plank on that ship. He was also on board the Enterprise when it picked up the astronauts from several of the Apollo missions. But if you asked him, nothing ever happened to him. Uncle Harlan was a quiet, stoic man who did not like to be the center of attention. But he did tell one wonderful story involving him, my grandfather, my granny, the USS Enterprise, and travel. In 1960, the Enterprise was to put to sea for 9 months for her maiden voyage around the world. Uncle Harlan was getting very homesick, and his commanding officer came to him and said, "I am giving you 5 days leave. Go home, see your family, get yourself straight. I need you in top functioning order when we put to sea." So he flew to Danley Field in Montgomery. Now the way he flew to Danley Field, I don't know if there are any retired military here, but if there are, you will be familiar with this form of transportation. He called it a hot plane. The way the system worked is that if you were active military and had to go somewhere, the military would get you there free if you were willing to travel as cargo. You might go on a box of nails or a bag of mail, or you might be sitting in the seat of a Jeep that was strapped into the bed of a cargo plane. They didn't say it would be comfortable, but they would get you there. Uncle Harlan didn't tell his parents or anyone that he was coming. It was a surprise visit. He just showed up on the doorstep and everyone was thrilled to see him. The family had a big supper and gathering so that he could visit with his friends and relations. My Granny Ruby had him dress up in his whites so she could show him off at church on Sunday. He was having a great visit when the man from Danley Field called on Sunday afternoon. He said, "The plane you were supposed to take back to Norfolk Naval Station on Tuesday has been grounded because of mechanical trouble. I have already checked with Maxwell Field and Gunter Air Force Base. There are no planes going back to Virginia. You will have to get back on your own." Uncle Harlan panicked. There was no money for a commercial airline flight, This was 1960 and air travel was very expensive. The trains wouldn't get him there. So after a lot of investigation and phone calls, he discovered that if he could get to Columbia, South Carolina by 4 a.m. on Tuesday morning, he could take a bus that would put him out at the gate of the Norfolk Naval Station 1 hour before he had to report to duty on ships. The only option was for my grandfather to take a few days off work and drive his son to South Carolina. So my Granny Ruby and my grandfather Walter packed up their little white Dodge Dart and the three of them hit the road. Ruby took a pasteboard box and filled it with fried chicken, fruit, potted meat, white bread, crackers, peanut butter, and bottles of Coca-Cola. Because you didn't have McDonald's on the side of the road in those days. Plus, they were a rural family with 6 children and a modest income, and used to practicing an extreme economy. They probably slept in the car on the return trip. Now, Walter, my grandfather, could not read. He dropped out of school in the 2nd grade after his mama died, and he never went back. Therefore, he usually took the same route wherever he went, because he could not read road signs. My grandmother Ruby was very wise, because if he wanted to go completely around town instead of across it to get somewhere, that was fine by her. She never questioned the route he took. She was happy to ride. The Eisenhower interstate system was brand new. We just call it the interstate system now, but it used to be called the Eisenhower interstate system. It revolutionized travel in the U.S. Before its existence, road trips were slow and arduous, with most highways connecting the main streets of small towns. The interstate system had not yet reached Alabama. Walter, Ruby, and Harlan had to drive on rural highways to somewhere in North Georgia to pick up Interstate 20. So they got on the interstate, and many hours later, in the wee hours of the morning, they arrived in Columbia, South Carolina. My uncle went into the bathroom at the bus station and changed into his dress whites because regulations required you to travel in uniform. Walter and Ruby hugged and kissed him and told him they loved him, and they put him on the bus to Norfolk, Virginia. He watched them waving in the glow of the station lights as the bus pulled out. He settled into his seat and pulled his cap down over his eyes to take a nap because it was 4 o'clock in the morning. About an hour and a half later, as the bus rolled north on Interstate 95, the sun began to wake him up, and he looked out the window in the early morning light and happened to notice a little white Dodge Dart with Alabama license plates passing the bus, and the woman on the passenger seat was waving at him. It was his mother. Walter and Ruby had gotten on the interstate going the wrong way. He tried to signal them that they needed to turn around, but it was to no avail. About that time, he noticed a sign that said 45 miles to Richmond, 189 miles to Washington, D.C. He thought, oh heavens, I've got to get them turned around before they get there. So he went up to speak to the bus driver, and the bus driver, after hearing his dilemma, said, we'll see what we can do. First, the bus pulled up behind the car and flashed his lights. The woman on the passenger seat threw her hands into the air, and the car sped up and changed lanes. Next, the bus driver tried using his horn and flashing his lights simultaneously, but the same thing happened. The woman on the passenger seat threw up her hands, and the car sped up and changed lanes. It was discovered later that each time the bus approached the car, Ruby threw her hands into the air and hollered at her husband, "Ooh, Walter, the man's gonna run us down. Get out of his way, get out of his way." After they tried this a few times, people on the bus were beginning to wake up and started yelling suggestions to the front of the bus. So finally the bus driver looked at Uncle Harlan and said, "We're gonna try this one last time. You come up here to the front of this bus. I'm going to pull up behind them and put my emergency signals on and flash the lights and blow the horn. When I do, you jump up and down and wave your arms and make as much commotion as you can. If they don't see you and can't figure out who we are, they're on their own." So that's what they did, and sure enough, Walter, my grandfather, saw them in the rearview mirror and they pulled over. Now, as I said before, Uncle Harlan was a very quiet man and did not like to be the center of attention. He told me this story only once, and he said, "Now, my boy, I've been through a lot of things, but till this day, that's still the most embarrassing moment of my life. Because when that little white Dodge with Alabama plates pulled to the side of the road, that whole Greyhound bus stood up and applauded." So he and the bus driver came up along the passenger window, and the bus driver was trying to explain to Walter what a cloverleaf intersection was and how he needed to exit and turn around. Harlan couldn't reveal to the bus driver that his father could not read because Walter would be embarrassed. Finally, he tapped the bus driver on the shoulder and said, "They're not going to figure it out. We're going to have to come up with another way." The bus driver said, "Mr. Walter, I want you to fall in behind this bus. About 4.5 miles up the road, I'm going to slow down to 40 miles an hour and put my emergency signals on. When I do, you get off at that exit. At the bottom of that exit, you go left and drive up under this interstate. The very first left you can take, you take it, and that will put you on the interstate and go in the direction you need to go." Walter said, "Thank you, sir, I can do that." As the bus driver walked back to the bus, Uncle Harlan said, "Can I have a minute?" The bus driver looked at him and tapped his watch and said, "This gray dog gets paid to run. You got 1 minute." He leaned into the car window and said, "Mama, Daddy, what were y'all doing? Where did you think you were going? You're passing all kinds of things we didn't pass on the way to Columbia, South Carolina. And we've been chasing y'all for nearly an hour and have passed at least 6 signs that say this interstate goes to Washington, D.C. Mama, you can read. Why didn't you say something?" She just looked at him, and before she could say anything, Walter spoke up and said, "Son, I got on the road going in the direction I thought I was supposed to go. And I have lived in Alabama all of my life, and I was confident I would recognize it when I got back to it."